Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Late Departure. I am Adam, and this is my continuing journey now as an airline pilot. And oh, plane break. Don't really know if we can really see it, but there's a float plane coming in. And if you can't tell by the SS Klondike behind me here, I'm in the majestic Yukon. I'm in Whitehorse. I just flew out here last night, and I'll be flying back later on this afternoon here. And well, I'm doing what I always dreamed of. I'm finally getting to go places and shoot videos and do really cool stuff. You know, I have wanted to do this for so long, and all the hard work's finally paying off. And I'll show you what kind of stuff I'm up to. And today also I have an interesting topic, and that is knowing what I know now after all the people I've talked with and after having gotten this far. If I were to go back and do this all again, finish my training, and then try to make that difficult stage between 250 hours and career, what would have I done? So we'll talk about that. But first, I don't know, I've always wanted to go out and just get lots of delicious food and find things. The flight attendant suggested this place called the Bake Cafe. I'm not going to eat all this stuff here. I actually got some Danishes down there. Those ones I'm going to bring back to the wife back in Vancouver and the baby. I also got her, I don't know, a raspberry cruffin. I don't know what this is. I think it's like a croissant muffin that's stuffed with something. And I also got myself some breakfast. I've never heard of this before. Whoa, if I can get this thing out. It's pretty flimsy. It's a shakshuka, I don't know, a shakshuka croissant. It's like eggs and spicy tomato and spinach and stuff like that. Looks pretty good. Oh yeah, that's interesting. It's like sun-dried tomato, egg, and cheese and all kinds of. It's like a great breakfast croissant. I'm gonna get back to that later. And I'm also gonna try maybe another place today. We'll see how time goes, but you always got to see how much stuff you get time for. But yeah, whenever you're lucky enough to get these layovers, it's great to go somewhere and try some new food and do some interesting things. And man, that's really cool. I like that. That's nice and spicy. Kind of heats you up on this. You can see I'm behind me, like I said, I have the majestic SS Klondike, and even more majestic behind me here, I have the Yukon River. Just absolutely beautiful. And it's fall, you see all the autumn foliage, the leaves and everything like that. And up top there on that cliff is actually the airport. So when we got here, the company has transportation set up for us, and they take us all the way around the back there of that kind of bluff where the airport is, and then we go down to our hotel. But in any case, so I digress. I'm in a beautiful place here. You got the river in front of me, beautiful mountains of Whitehorse around us, and the city so far is just gorgeous. I love it. All right, so to the topic at hand, if I were to go back and do this again, would I do anything differently? Now, when I did my training, I was able to meet a whole bunch of people from different backgrounds. We had some people at our training who had gone to some of the specific colleges that let them get direct entry right into the regionals, and that is an option as well. It is very expensive. I think they were saying it's anywhere between $150,000 and $200,000. I think some of the places might have some scholarships or something like that as well, but there's a few colleges, if you Google them, that have direct entry into some of the regionals. So that's something definitely to look into. But would I do that if I were to go back? And I did have that option too. I was looking into that. I was looking into doing that and trying to get in. But the thing with that, and also what I found out from them, is from entire classes full of people, in my particular group of new hires, there are only maybe 4 or 5 people who went through this program. Meanwhile, there's something like 40 or 50 people in their cohort that maybe didn't quite get in. And so that's kind of the risk there. Yeah, you do have a guaranteed interview. Now, whether or not you'll actually get a job with the company, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe if you you have this, you have a leg up or something like that. But it looks like not every single graduate gets the direct entry. So some people, they get an email that says, thank you for your time, go off, work, get some hours, come back later, and maybe we'll be able to hire you. So that is something. And again, like if you're confident and you're top of the class and you're doing really well, working really hard, possibly you have the chance to go direct entry. Now, that being said, that's the first of the options I'm going to talk about today. You come into a regional at a direct entry position, and the plus side of that is, yeah, you're right in the airlines. You get the airline experience right off the bat. It's great. You're getting the experience hands-on of what you need to do, and that's something definitely from my experience as a flight instructor. Coming into airlines is an eye-opener because you're doing stuff that you're not used to. Two crew environment is a very new environment for someone who's flight instructing, because flight instructing, even though you are kind of two crew, there's a big difference between two people flying with one kind of just flying one aircraft in tandem versus you sitting back as an instructor and trying to let the student fly by themselves as much as possible. And so sharing those roles and those duties definitely are challenging. So getting that right from the get-go, and especially after talking with some of these new hires that were straight from a college with 250 hours, there's definitely an advantage there, just coming into it, hitting the ground running, knowing exactly what to expect. Because a lot of these colleges train you to do exactly that. They train you two crew, you have to take a course on two crew, and quite often I think they're linked with the regionals themselves. So they have a good idea of what's expected, and they make sure the students know that as well. So that's great. The downside, and they did just recently talk about this, is that there's something called pilot in command under supervision, or PICUS, or supervised pilot in command. I think PICUS is the more correct term, though. And what that means is, to get your ATPL, your airline transport pilot's license, you need to get a certain amount of pilot in command time. And as a first officer in an airline, all pilot in command time technically is the captain's, even for me. If you're sitting in the right seat, all pilot in command time goes to the captain. So if you need that pilot in command time to get your ATPL, now this is where it gets rough. You could be waiting for, and like some of these guys apparently stay in the regionals for anywhere between 4 to 7 years. And that depends on how much flying. Like, for example, for the first year in the regionals, we're looking at maybe averaging about, if we're lucky, somewhere between 200 to 400 hours in a year. Could be more, could be less. Depends on how lucky you are with the reserve. And because one thing is, you get stuck on a reserve a lot, which means if they call you, you go and fly. If they don't call you, you don't get any hours. So in addition to that, now you're also, of the few hours you do get as a regional pilot, you only get a certain amount. And I think, don't quote me on this, but we just got a memo about this, but Transport Canada just switched back to the original system, which is you get 50% of your pilot in command under supervision hours. It's so variable. It depends on the person, but you could be in the regionals for 4, 7, 10 years, just trying to get enough pilot in command to get your ATPL, which you need to get into the majors as well out here in Canada. So you need to get your 1500 there, and all of the pilot in command time, and all of your nighttime is easy to get. But night pilot in command time, for example, I've heard of some people that actually, they go back to flight schools and they'll rent a Cessna every night for like 2 months and just go out and grind out like 4 hours a night or something like that, just to get that night pilot in command. And that sounds pretty rough, especially if you're working at the same time. That being said, that's just something to keep in mind. So you get this advantage of doing the direct to regional, university program. You get to get in the airlines, you get that experience. And then the plus side is, you're going to have a huge leg up over other people who spend years outside of the regionals, outside of the airlines, doing bush flying or pipeline surveillance or flight instructing like I did, right? And so you'll basically, once you do get those pilot command hours and you get your ATPL and you go to captain, the aircraft really well and you'll be all set. But Meanwhile, people who got their 1,500 hours, got their ATPLs, got their pilot command time elsewhere, they could be leapfrogging you into the majors. So while they might only spend 2 or 3 years at the regionals before they go on to the majors, you might be spending, 5 to 7 years. Again, your mileage may vary, depends highly from person to person, right? So that's the direct college entry route. And again, that was something I considered. The other two paths are obviously flight instructor and then flying, like bush flying, flying King Airs, Pilatus, whatever, you end up wanting to do, or flying, Twin Otters up north or whatever. Now, the thing with flying, going direct to flying, Twin Otters, King Airs, Pilatus, whatever, all those kinds of operations, this is the second path. And this is one that I said in my last video, like years ago. I said, maybe I should have gone that way. I would have gotten more experience doing real flying. I would have gotten to actually get out in the world, go places, fly with passengers, learn what it's like to fly two crew environment. Maybe not quite the same as you'd have in the airlines, but something possibly along the lines, unless it's single pilot ops. And I was thinking maybe that would have been a better path, because I ended up, I was flight instructing for about 2 years, and I used that route to get all my hours and do all my stuff. But that route, again, so the pluses of that one, like I said, you get some two crew environment, possibly, unless you're doing single pilot. You get out doing real flying, which sometimes it sounds like, especially having gone through the interview process, it sounds like that is a big point. Because one of the interview questions I had was, as a flight instructor, how would you make up for, or how would you deal with the fact that you haven't done any real flying? Which I know sounds kind of rude, but it's just a question they asked. And you have to talk about the kind of flying that you did. And in my particular experience, I was out in the prairie, so I had some pretty extreme weather. I was an IFR instructor, so I got a lot of that kind of realish sort of flying. But again, I wasn't flying with passengers, it wasn't two crew. But I had to make my case about how, flying with a student is sort of like two crew and all that kind of stuff. But it was a difficult argument to make, for sure. And I could tell that it was something they're looking for, that experience really flying. Now, that being said, even in those environments, if you're flying like two crew in a Pilatus or in a King Air or something like that, you have the same pilot and commander supervision uh, situation. And one thing that I found was really interesting was some of the guys that I had started with in my group, they had come from those kinds of operations. They were flying, like Navajos for photo operations, or they were flying, out in the bush. They were flying for, Harbor Air in Vancouver, or they're flying for Ken Borick up north. And there were guys there, like I had come into the regionals with something like 1,700 hours in my ATPLs. Meanwhile, some of these guys were coming in with like 3,000 hours, and they had nowhere near enough pilot and command time to get their ATPLs. I don't know how. I don't know how it ended up that way, but I was surprised. And so I was thinking, okay, well, in that case, yeah, they did get real flying experience. They got some two crew experience. They were flying around some interesting operations. They had experience with passengers, uh, but they didn't have the ATPL. So even though they had a lot of hours, they're still at the mercy of the pilot and commander supervision program to get their ATPL, to go to captain. And the thing with captain is, in the regionals, it's literally double the salary what you get as a first officer. Like that little jump over there, that jump to captain over to the left seat, that's a lot of money. And so even if you're not going to the majors right away, if you have the option to get into the left seat, you study hard, you work hard, you learn the aircraft, you study your procedures, your SOPs, you could very easily, in like 1 year or 2 years, get into the left seat, get captain time, and get double the salary, get, captain experience, which I'm sure is a big help to getting another job in the majors. And meanwhile, these guys who went off to do these other operations, they had that obstacle. So again, you have this advantage of, you have this different experience. You might come into it a little bit better, knowing how to operate larger aircraft. Some of these guys, again, flying King Airs, Pilatus, all those kinds of things. they're slightly larger aircraft. It'll maybe give you a little bit of a legs up in the transition to flying, whatever you end up flying in the regionals, whether it's the Dash 8, the Cucumber, or, like an CRJ 900 or any of the Embraers, all those kinds of things. Maybe it doesn't, who knows? But that being said, that's sort of that path. And so, yeah, I did say that I regretted not taking that path when I had kind of first gotten into instructing, or that I really wanted to try that one. But I'll circle back to that in a little bit. So the third and final path, which is the one I chose, was flight instructing. Now, flight instructing has the benefit of every single hour you do is PIC. You get pilot and command time. And for me, it was no problem. By the time I got to my 1,500 hours, I had way more than enough of the requirements to do my ATPLs. And I did my exams, I got my ATPL done, and it was really, really easy, really straightforward. And, as a flight instructor, I had, my choice of schedule. I could really do things the way I wanted to. I got as many or as little hours I wanted to. And of course, as a lot of you know, actually, maybe you don't know because I didn't talk very much during my flight instructor period there, I worked really hard. I was doing anywhere between 4 to 6 flight hours a day of PIC. That's a lot of time. I was getting probably 5 times the amount of flying time that I am right now as an airline pilot. And I was getting a ton of hours, all PIC, various types, nighttime, IFR, all that kind of stuff. Multi-time, multi was huge. That's another thing. If you're going to become a flight instructor, aim to do multi, because if you are a multi-IFR instructor, you get that multi-time under your belt. That's a huge, huge plus. And that was one thing that when I did the interviews, they said, all right, well, you have whatever of my total at the time, like 1,700 hours, you have something ridiculous, like 1,100 hours of multi-time, which is huge. And for them, that was, I don't want to say it was a shoe-in, but it was definitely a huge leg up. And that was something that impressed the interviewers. And I would imagine was something that led to them hiring me in the end there, because, like I did have high scores in my ATPL exams, which I presented at the interview. And because I was still waiting for the, the actual certification to be sent through. And I studied really hard. I worked really hard. That's why I wasn't making YouTube videos, because I was working hard, ridiculously hard. Like working, like I said, 6 flight hours means I was working for like 12 hours a day with a new baby, by the way. I mentioned that I think once before, but I had a newborn baby. I was working 12 hours a day. And then when I got home, my wife was amazing. She was taking care of the baby so much. And meanwhile, I was studying. The moment I got home, I'd be studying until I went to sleep. Next day, work all day. And I worked 7 days a week. I didn't take any vacations till the very end of it when I was about to go off the airlines there. But in any case, yeah, it was just absolutely bonkers how hard I worked to do that. But in 2 years, I got, like I said, went straight to 1,700 hours. I got a ton of time. I got all the time I needed, wrote my ATPLs, got that done. Now here's the advantage. I'm in the airlines. I don't have the 2 crew experience, so I'm working really hard at that. I don't have the big plane experience, so again, working hard at learning that. But I can go into the left seat anytime I want. I can bid for that left seat. I could go into the captain's seat and make double the salary right off the bat. Plus, I don't have the ATPLs to worry about anymore. I can enjoy my time. As you can see right now, I'm here enjoying my time in front of this beautiful flowing river and the mountains and all of that stuff here. I don't have to worry about studying in my off time, except for my SOPs and the company stuff. I don't have to go back and I'm not grinding for the ATPL exams because I've done all that. And that's a huge load off. Now, again, kind of looking at, this is sort of the conclusion here, looking at everything that's happened and what I've done to get here and how it's all turned out. Would I still go back and choose a different path? Would I have gone the college route? Would I have gone the just flying, 702, 703 ops or something like that, smaller operations to get these hours and do this to get here? Absolutely not. Flight instructor was almost a guaranteed position. They're always hiring flight instructors. There's always a turnover. everywhere you go in Canada, if you want to be bold, go somewhere that's more remote, where you're sure to get a job that, a larger operation like I did at Harv's Air. But that being said, it's not always the case. I know that, them and many other flight schools aren't always hiring, and they're always also looking out for people who are working hard. So if you work hard, get high scores, you get on the radar there as someone who never makes trouble, who always, does the due diligence and impresses the examiners, impresses the instructors, you have a pretty good chance of getting a job as a flight instructor there or anywhere. But that being said, yeah, if you can find a good place where you can get a lot of hours, flight instructing by and far is the fastest way to get the ATPLs, get those hours. But again, you have the disadvantage of not having the two crew environment, not having the kind of real flying experience. But if you get multi-instructing time, that is absolutely huge for getting a career here. And then the other thing is, like I said, I have a leg up because I can move to the left seat anytime I want. Obviously, I want to put in the time and the effort to learn the aircraft, learn the SOPs. I don't want to be a bad captain. I would want to be a captain who knows all their stuff, and you're in charge of a lot of lives. It's a different scene than flying a smaller operation, right? So I take that very seriously, and that's something that I would really work at. But I do have the choice, which is really nice. And then the second thing is, if I do decide to go into the majors, into the airlines, or bigger airlines, I guess, like the international long haul and those kinds of things, I also have the advantage that I have the hours, I have the ATPL. I can also go to the airlines or go to larger operations, I guess the majors as people call them, a lot more easily than some of my colleagues, like the ones that have 3,000, 4,000 hours that don't have their ATPL yet. They can't do it because one of the requirements is, well, they say 2,000 hours and ATPLs. You need those two things. If you haven't gotten those things done, you can't go to the majors. So that's a big thing, and that's why I worked really hard to get those done. But if you work in a smaller operation and you're restricted by like pilot in command under supervision program, and you're getting so few pilot in command hours, you might get stuck, and you might not be able to get the hours you need to get your ATPLs, which means you might have to spend a few more years in the regionals, or whatever you're doing to get what you need to get to your final goal, if that's your final goal, right? So long story short, if I were to go back and do it again, if I was younger, if I was 18, absolutely, I'd go through a college program, drop $200,000 and go through it, and I'll spend 10 years in a regional. You're young, it's great experience, you're learning the airlines, things like that. But for someone like me who started in his mid 30s, who wants to get into a higher paying, more options, more seniority as quickly as possible, for me, the flight instructor route is the best. And I would go back and do that again if I was in my 30s, maybe even my late 20s. I'd do that again. But again, if I was really young, the college program would be very cool. But that's basically it. That's my take on if I were to go back and do it again. I'm glad in retrospectively that I did the flight instructor path, because it turned out to be the perfect path for me, got me to where I wanted to go as fast as humanly possible. And here I am reaping enjoying the fruits of my labors, or whatever you call it. And everything is looking pretty good right now. One thing I do want to quickly add is that although I didn't choose the bush pilot experience, and I don't want to throw any shade on that because I think it's amazing. There's a lot of really fun stuff you can do. I did mention really specifically that the college program is something I'd do if I was young, if I really, really just wanted to get into the airlines, if that was like my main goal, and that's what I really, really wanted. But I do know that there's a lot of people who go into bush flying, they fly up north because it is a lot of fun flying. And so if that's something you're interested in, if I was young as well, it's possible I could have done that as well. I just really like flying jets, and I like the kind of lifestyle that goes along with being a pilot. But there's definitely something to be said for, going out and doing some bush flying, because, flying around places like this, just look at it, it's gorgeous. You get to do some really cool stuff, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I would definitely recommend that if it's something you're into. But, again, just wanted to put an asterisk on that one point I made. All right, so I might hit up a few other places here. I'll haphazardly insert some short video of me maybe walking around and enjoying some other stuff here in the Yukon, but I'm gonna enjoy the rest of my breakfast in front of the beautiful Yukon River here in the mountains and the SS Klondike, and enjoy the rest of my day. All right, all the pilots are talking about this place. Let's go have some lunch. I guess it's Mexican and Whitehorse. Not the crispy carnitas. It was good. I have to say, as far as burritos go, it was decent for, I guess, Canada. I don't know if that's fair to say, but yeah, it was like $30 for a burrito. It's a little expensive. It was decent, but I think I was a little spoiled with hardcore, super authentic burritos in San Francisco at that place where no one spoke English and they only did burritos. That was amazing. It was decent. But yeah, for $30 for a burrito, I'm not sure if I'll be back too soon, but we'll see. I'll have to try some other stuff out here in Whitehorse, but the bakery I went to, Baked or whatever it's called, was really good. So yeah, we'll keep trying places here. For those of you, if you have questions about what I've been doing or what you need to do at certain points in your career, or questions about your planning, again, I'm no expert. I only know what I've learned from my limited experience with this stuff, but anything I can do, just ask me questions and I'd be happy to, make a video and try to answer stuff. And, the whole goal of me making this entire channel is just to share what I've learned so that people maybe in my situation can make good choices, or at least learn from my mistakes so you don't mess up in the ways that I mess up. And there's so many ways that I mess up, but the most important thing always is, what did you learn from it? How did you improve? How did you get better? And I have a lot of stories that I want to share over time here, but it's all about just improving, getting better, doing better every single day. And I think that's kind of the essence of what you want to be as a pilot: always learning, always improving. All right, well, hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my day here before I head back. And well, I'm showing you guys right now, never too late. And see you guys next time.